I left my husband for a man I met in a support group who turned out to be a registered offender, and now CPS has taken my kids even though nothing inappropriate ever happened to them. I threw away my marriage to a sheriff's deputy for someone who had been hiding his criminal history, and now John has remarried a dispatcher while I only see my children during supervised visits because I chose a charming manipulator over their safety. I'm Natalie, 31, was married to John, 33, for 7 years with 2 young children. John worked as a sheriff's deputy and was extremely protective of our family, which I found suffocating and controlling after years of his rigid rules about safety, security, and constant vigilance about potential dangers. John's law enforcement mentality dominated our household with strict schedules, security protocols, and hypervigilance that made me feel like I was living in a police state rather than a family home. He'd run background checks on babysitters, neighbors, and anyone who came into contact with our children. I started attending a grief support group after my mother passed away, seeking emotional connection and understanding that John couldn't provide. His response to my grief was practical and solution-focused rather than emotionally supportive, making me feel isolated during a difficult time. That's where I met Jeff, who was attending the group to deal with his own family losses. He was charming, emotionally available, and understood grief in ways that made me feel heard and validated. Jeff was everything John wasn't: spontaneous, emotionally expressive, and free from rigid thinking. Jeff would listen to my frustrations about John's controlling behavior and constant security concerns. He made me feel like my emotions were valid and that I deserved a partner who understood my need for emotional connection rather than just physical protection. Our conversations became increasingly intimate as Jeff shared his own struggles with loss and helped me process my grief. He was patient and understanding, offering emotional support that felt genuine and caring compared to John's practical approach to my problems. Jeff started suggesting we meet outside the support group for coffee and longer conversations. He said I needed someone who truly understood emotional pain rather than someone who tried to fix everything with logic and security measures. I began lying to John about staying late after support group meetings to spend time with Jeff. John would ask detailed questions about the meetings and other attendees, but I deflected his concerns by claiming he was being paranoid and controlling as usual. Jeff made me feel alive and emotionally connected in ways I hadn't experienced in years. He was romantic and spontaneous, planning surprise meetings and treating me like someone special instead of just another security responsibility to manage and protect. The affair became physical after 2 months of emotional connection. Jeff was passionate and attentive, making me feel desired and important rather than just another person John needed to keep safe through rules and precautions. I started planning to leave John for Jeff, convinced that my children deserved a stepfather who was emotionally available rather than a father who treated family life like a security operation. Jeff seemed perfect for someone seeking emotional freedom. Jeff encouraged me to leave John, saying my children needed to see their mother happy and fulfilled rather than controlled and restricted. He painted pictures of the emotionally open family life we could build together once I was free from John's oppressive household. I made the decision to leave John after 4 months of secret meetings with Jeff. I told John the first was unhappy with his controlling behavior and needed space to figure out what I wanted from life, moving out with the children to a small apartment. John was devastated but immediately suspicious about my sudden desire for independence. His law enforcement instincts told him something was wrong, and he started asking questions about where I'd been spending time and who I'd been meeting. When John discovered I'd been attending a support group, he became concerned about my new associations and the influence of people he hadn't vetted. His protective instincts kicked in when he realized strangers had access to information about our family. John decided to run background checks on support group members, using his law enforcement access to investigate people who might pose risks to his family. The search was slightly outside his official duties, but his parental instincts overrode protocol concerns. Jeff's background check revealed a criminal history that made John's worst fears seem reasonable. Jeff was a registered offender with convictions related to inappropriate conduct with minors, making him exactly the kind of person John had been trying to protect our family from. John confronted me with Jeff's criminal record, showing documentation of charges and registration requirements that Jeff had never mentioned during our months of intimate conversations. I was horrified to learn the truth about someone I trusted completely. I ended the relationship with Jeff immediately, but the damage was already done. I brought a registered offender into my children's lives and had been planning to introduce them to someone with a documented history of harmful behavior toward minors. John reported the situation to CPS as required by law, explaining that his children had been exposed to a registered offender through their mother's relationship. Even though nothing inappropriate had happened, the potential risk triggered child protection protocols. CPS opened an investigation into my judgment and decision-making regarding my children's safety. My relationship with Jeff raised serious questions about my ability to protect my children from dangerous individuals and make appropriate parenting choices. The investigation revealed that I'd been bringing the children to meetings with Jeff and had been planning to introduce him as their potential stepfather. CPS determined that my poor judgment created unacceptable risk to their welfare, and now CPS has taken my kids even though nothing inappropriate ever happened to them. CPS removed my children from my custody pending a full investigation into my relationship with Jeff and my ability to make appropriate safety decisions. Even though nothing harmful had happened to them, my poor judgment was deemed a significant risk factor. The custody hearing was devastating as John's lawyer presented evidence of Jeff's criminal history and my failure to protect our children from a registered offender. The judge was appalled that I brought such a person into my children's lives without any background verification. I was granted only supervised visitation while John received full custody, with CPS monitoring all my interactions with the children. The court determined that my judgment regarding dangerous individuals made unsupervised contact inappropriate until I completed extensive counseling. Jeff disappeared completely once his criminal history became known to authorities. He'd apparently been using the support group to target vulnerable women, and my case prompted investigation into his other relationships within the grief counseling community. John's background check had been technically improper, but the discovery of Jeff's criminal history validated his protective instincts and demonstrated why his security measures were necessary. His violation of protocol was overlooked given the circumstances. The supervised visits were humiliating and heartbreaking. My children were confused about why mommy couldn't take them home and why someone had to watch us during our time together. They started asking fewer questions and seemed increasingly distant. John married a dispatcher from his department within 2 years of our divorce. She understood law enforcement life and appreciated his protective nature, building the stable family environment I destroyed by choosing emotional excitement over security. My children adapted to life with their stepmother, who supported John's safety protocols while providing the emotional warmth I thought was missing. They started calling her mom while I remained the woman they visited twice a month under supervision. The CPS case remained open for over a year, requiring me to complete parenting classes, psychological evaluations, and ongoing counseling to address my poor judgment regarding dangerous individuals. Every aspect of my fitness as a mother was scrutinized and questioned. I had to move back in with my parents, unemployed and facing legal bills from the custody battle. My reputation in our community was destroyed once word spread about my relationship with a registered offender and the CPS involvement. The dating world became impossible to navigate with supervised custody and my association with Jeff's criminal case. Most men weren't interested in someone who'd shown such poor judgment regarding their children's safety, and my situation raised too many red flags. 3 years later, I'm still working to rebuild some kind of relationship with my children through supervised visits and court-mandated programs. The judge reviews my case annually but shows little inclination to restore unsupervised custody given my demonstrated poor judgment. John and his wife have built a beautiful family that includes my children, providing the security and stability I'd rejected for emotional connection with someone dangerous. They're raising my kids in the safe environment John had always tried to create. Jeff was eventually charged with additional crimes related to targeting vulnerable women in support groups. My case helped authorities identify a pattern of predatory behavior, but I'd already lost my family by the time his true nature was revealed. The worst part is knowing that my children are genuinely better off with John and his wife providing daily stability while I remain a supervised visitor in their lives. My poor choices created circumstances where losing my kids was the best outcome for their welfare. I threw away 7 years of marriage and my relationship with my children for someone who had been using grief counseling to target vulnerable women. John's protective instincts that I'd resented had been completely justified and necessary. The support group that had seemed like emotional salvation turned out to be a hunting ground for predators targeting women in vulnerable states. My search for emotional connection had exposed my children to exactly the kind of danger John had been trying to prevent. John got justice and a partner who appreciates his dedication to family safety. My children got the protection they deserved with parents who put their welfare first. I got exactly what I chose, permanent consequences for prioritizing my emotional needs over my children's safety. The emotional freedom I'd sought by leaving John's protective environment cost me everything that actually mattered. My children needed security more than I needed spontaneity, and John had been providing exactly what they required while I complained about feeling controlled. I had a husband who would have died to protect our family, but I chose someone who represented the exact threat John had dedicated his career to stopping. My rebellion against safety protocols exposed my children to a registered offender and cost me the right to raise them. The grief counseling that was supposed to help me heal from my mother's death became the source of my greatest loss. My emotional vulnerability was exploited by someone who specialized in targeting women exactly like me during their most difficult moments.